If you want to see how I use carb refeeds to stay lean while putting on muscle, stay tuned. Hey guys, Zach from All Strength Training. I'm going to walk you through one of my carb refeed days. And first I want to go over what a carb refeed is. Carb refeed should be used when someone's either dieting or working themselves out of a diet. These are typically not used right away. We typically want to get somebody into a pretty good deficit, have them losing a good amount of body fat first, and then carb refeeds are put in once progress is going to start to stall out. So a couple of reasons that we might use a refeed. So first things first, they're used as kind of protect the metabolism. So as we diet, we gradually are going to start to see a decrease in metabolism because as body weight and body fat levels go down, your body's naturally going to adjust to that. So refeeds are intended to be placed in there to keep the metabolism elevated. You gradually deplete glycogen out of the muscle tissue, and then as we throw a higher carb day in with higher calories, it's going to keep the thyroid from completely down regulating. So absolutely one of the first reasons that we want to use that. The other reason we might want to use it is to make sure that we're keeping our muscle tissue. So a carb refeed is just that. It's high carb, it's not high calorie. So these are not cheat days. This is not a burgers and hot dogs and pizza and french fries kind of a day. It's a relatively low fat, pretty high carb setup. What that looks like is going to vary depending on the person. As you watch my day, you're going to see that the carbs get pretty high, but the fat is kept super, super, super low. We want to get all that sugar and all that glycogen into the muscle tissue so that when we go back to a calorie deficit, we're not going to end up taking muscle tissue to use for fuel because there's glycogen available. So see what this looks like. And then if you have questions, make sure you post in the comments below. All right, so here's what's going into my first meal. So I'm gonna do 300 grams of liquid egg whites, 2 pieces of sourdough toast, doing half of a container of naked juice, so it's 8 ounces. I'll do a single serving of cream of rice, it's 45 grams, and then we'll do a tablespoon and a half, so 21 grams of honey, and we'll get this all going here together. All right, so this is everything put together. So this is about 133 grams of carbs coming on meal 1 for the day. All right, so I'm on to my second meal of the day. I'm eating about every 2.5 or 3 hours. So I'm getting 6 meals in between about 6 a.m. and then 9 p.m. So this is meal 2. One thing I want to kind of go over before we look at the food though. So to make sure that I can keep all this food down and keep my digestion going well, so I use a couple of things before each meal. So I've got these out. So this is a glucose disposal agent from New Ethics. So this is GDA Max. So this has berberine and some other things to help keep insulin control because I want to make sure I'm trying to shuttle all of these carbs into my muscle tissue. So I'm using this to reduce the workload on the pancreas. So I'll take one of these before each meal, and then I'm also using digestive support. So I use 2 different things. So I'm using Biogest from Thorne. So this is hydrochloric acid. So this is basically the same stuff that's in your stomach acid, but I want to make sure that there's sufficient amounts of that in my stomach. Now with me, I've got Crohn's disease, so I already have some kind of predisposal to some digestive issues. So I'm just making sure that, it may be overkill, but I kind of don't want to run the risk of finding out that, I put myself in a bad situation with some of the food that I'm taking in. So I'll take 2 capsules of the Biogest about 10 minutes before the meal starts. So I've already taken these. Same thing with the glucose disposal stuff. I want to get this stuff into my system before I start taking in food. And then I'll finish it with, this is Digest Gold. So this is probably one of the best digestive enzyme products on the market. So this, you can see on the label, there's a shit ton of different digestive enzymes in here. So I want to make sure that, again, your body naturally produces digestive enzymes, but just with the volume of stuff that's going in, if I'm taking in 150 to 200 grams of carbs at a time, I need to make sure that stuff can be assimilated and absorbed. Because if I can't absorb it, you're going to run a risk for things like bloating and gas, and just you're not going to uptake it into the muscle tissue the way that you need to. So this is before basically every meal all day long. I'm going to take this about 10 or 15 minutes before I eat. So pretty much as I'm getting my food together, this stuff comes out. All right, so this is my second meal of the day. So what I've got is I've got 8 ounces of sweet potatoes. I've got 200 grams or 7 ounces of a jasmine rice. This is a cilantro rice. It's kind of like a Chipotle knockoff stuff, which goes down really well. I've got 7 ounces or 200 grams of blueberries. And then I've got a really lean ground turkey. This is like 99% lean. And then I've got some sugar-free barbecue sauce on that. It doesn't really matter if I'm using sugar-free or not sugar-free barbecue sauce on it. I kind of just don't want to put my calories toward something like barbecue sauce. I'd rather put it with something towards more food volume. So personal preference on this. But one thing you'll kind of notice is that I mentioned this ground turkey is 99% lean. When carb intake is this high, I need to make sure that I'm not taking in too much fat because it'll slow the digestion down too much. And one thing when you're using things like carb cycling is if we're doing high carb, and in this case, like we're talking over 900 grams of carbs for this day, I need to make sure I'm not also trying to throw a bunch of fat in there, because then I'm running the risk of that fat being uptaken as actual body fat as I'm saturating my muscle tissue and my liver with glycogen. So this is one thing you'll see on these like really, really high carb days. The goal is to basically keep fat intake as low as humanly possible pretty much all day long. You know, so a couple of grams at each meal max if you can, and minimal additive stuff. So one thing I'm also doing is at every meal I'm taking in a full blender bottle, which is about 28 ounces full of water. And I'm making sure that I'm keeping salt intake pretty high through the day. So to get these carbs into muscle tissue, you need water and you need salt to get it uptaken. So I'm gonna push water pretty consistently all day long. And then on stuff like this plate, I'll just do a couple of shakes of salt. Nothing extreme, but I don't want to try to go low salt or I'm going to have some issues with driving this stuff into muscle tissue. All right, now this is my pre-workout meal. This doesn't actually look like it's a lot, but this is a little bit over 800 calories. So it's just a hair under 150 grams of carbs, clocks in at 143 grams of carbs here. So I got 5 ounces of just chicken breast. There's just a coffee rub chicken breast, so that way it still tastes good, but I'm not layering it with a bunch of extra stuff. Got 200 grams of mango, so a little bit of fruit before we train. And then this is 2 servings, so 90 grams of cream of rice. It's also got a tablespoon or 16 grams of almond butter in it. So usually we're trying to keep fat pretty low, but pre-training, we're trying to blunt the release of this stuff just a little bit. So nothing crazy on fat, it's 8 grams, so it's not like we're going sky high. But we don't want all this to hit my bloodstream immediately and then have me tank with a big blood sugar drop in the middle of the training session. And then it's also got 2 tablespoons of honey on it, so 42 grams. So this whole meal, let's say, clocks out to be a little bit over 800 calories and 143 grams. I'm taking this in about an hour before I train. And then about 45 minutes later, I'm gonna do a pre-workout, which I'll show in a second. All right, so now I'm getting ready for training. So I've got pre-workout stuff and the stuff I'm gonna take in during training. So prior to training, I'm gonna take a pre-workout. So I'm using WTF by First Attachment. So I'm gonna take a scoop of that. I'm also gonna use about 5 grams of Hydro Max, which is glycerol. I wanna help pull water into the muscle tissue during training just to kind of continue to drive nutrients and drive blood into the area. And then for added carbs, we're gonna do 2 Rice Krispie treats, just push insulin up a little bit prior to training. I'm gonna do this in a full bottle of water. Again, I mentioned hammering salt and water throughout the day to make sure that these carbs are getting where they need to go. And then during training, I'm gonna use a couple of things. So I'm using the equivalent of a 20-ounce bottle of Gatorade. So I'm using the powdered stuff just because it's easier to keep around than a bunch of bottles. And then I'm also gonna use magnesium. So magnesium, I like to use this. It's not necessary to use it during training, but I do like to use it to balance out the sodium, just so make sure we're getting muscle tissue contracting. We're also making sure that those tissues can relax to, again, kind of continue to help drive blood. If it contracts and doesn't release, you can't get that repetitive contraction effect. So we want to put some of that in there. I'm going to use just a scoop of it, so 200 milligrams of magnesium. And then I'm going to use 2 scoops of creatine monohydrates. So nothing super complicated. Everybody knows creatine works tremendously well. Creatine is not time sensitive, so I could take this pretty much any time, but since I'm already taking a bunch of stuff that this is gonna mix well with, it's just an easy time for me to take it. So I'm taking 10 grams of creatine. And then for my actual intra-workout supplement, I'm using Field Rations from First Detachment. So this is a combination of amino acids. So these are essential amino acids. These are already basically pre-digested protein. So I don't need a lot of blood in my GI tract to assimilate this sort of stuff. So as opposed to taking like a whey shake where that's gonna require a little bit more blood, I want that blood in my muscles. I don't want it in my GI tract. And then this also contains highly branched cyclic dextrin. It's the equivalent of amino acids to protein. This is the same thing for carbohydrates. So super well broken down. It doesn't require blood to get in the GI tract. So that way it can get into my system really quickly, prevent fatigue during that training session so I can push nice and hard. So this I'm gonna take during my training session. Now all the workout stuff, I'm actually gonna continue slamming water. So this is a 70-ounce blender bottle. So I'm gonna go through this entire thing. I'm gonna start sipping it prior to my warm-ups, and then it's gonna be gone before I start my last set of the session. All right, this is my favorite meal of the day. So I just finished training, so this is my post-workout meal. So this is high carb, low fat protein pancakes. So I've got the mix already ready to go here. So it's combo of 150 grams of King Arthur's pancake mix. My wife and my oldest son have celiac, so we just keep gluten-free pancake mix in the house. There's nothing special about it other than it's just for that. And then we've got unsweetened applesauce. So I'm doing two servings of that. So it's 246 grams, no sugar added. Just so that way I'm still trying to keep it fairly nutritious on here. And then we're gonna put just 4 ounces of almond milk and a serving and a half of whey protein. So this is a caramel macchiato flavor. So basically getting caramel protein pancakes. So I'm gonna get this going. So you can see these are going slowly a couple of minutes aside. Usually takes maybe about 10 minutes total to get all these through. All right, this is the finished product. So this is 147 grams of carbs. This will last maybe about 5 minutes. All right, now we're on meal 5. So it's about 6 o'clock at night. So you'll kind of notice that there's a lot of consistency with the other stuff that I've been doing. So we've got the cilantro rice in here again. So it's 200 grams of rice. Got 5 ounces of a whitefish. This is just tilapia. So again, super low fat. Got 200 grams of pineapple. Pineapple sits super well with me digestively. Also not a lot of fiber, which on this particular day, we're trying to avoid fat and fiber. You may have noticed that there's been no vegetable intake on this day. My normal day is I use a lot of vegetables with every meal, but today, trying to do what I can to really push the insulin loading with the high carb stuff. And then you'll see cream of rice again, another 2 servings. So this meal altogether is another just shy of 150 grams. Nearing the end of the day, and then you'll see again I've got another blender bottle, so I'm going to take this in with the meal. Again, continue pushing water and salt all day too. All right, so last meal of the day. So I've got super lean ground beef. So this is 96.4. So still not very high fat, but something a little different than all the white meat that I've been doing all day. 8 ounces of sweet potatoes. Again, kind of more the same. 200 grams of blueberries. And then the last little bit of carbs coming from 2 different types of juice. Now both of these are no sugar added juice, so we're trying to still use some liquid stuff to try to minimize the digestive workload with that last meal before bed, but also not lay down a bunch of just unnecessary sugar. So I'm gonna do 8 ounces of the orange juice. I'm gonna do 8 ounces of the cranberry juice and then 4 ounces of the orange juice just to finish things off. So that's 117 grams of carbs. So that wraps up the day. All right, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight into what a refeed day should look like. Like I said, not everybody is going to be able to use numbers this high. For a little bit of context, this refeed, this is something I'm using. I dieted for a bodybuilding competition over the course of 6 months. And then as I'm gradually bringing my calories back up and trying to work on adding muscle tissue, we've gradually built up the carbs every day. They started at 500 grams of carbs and now they've been gradually working up. You see this day was just a hair under 950 grams of carbs. So, but absolutely something that is valuable for somebody who's trying to keep as much muscle tissue on or gain muscle tissue while mitigating how much body fat they're going to add. So if you like this, make sure you like the video and subscribe to our channel. If you have questions, put them in the comments below. I will be putting some other videos up on carb cycling over the next couple of weeks. So if you don't want to miss them, make sure that you subscribe and then hit the notifications so you can see those when they go up.